hands in the street. That is what we are, rolling in between. How can we be wrong? Sail away.
In 1967, a teenage girl got off a bus in Nashville, carrying $20, a guitar, and a stack of songs nobody wanted. Record men laughed at her squeaky voice, mocked her towering blonde hair, and told her flatly she had no future in country music. That same girl would go on to build a $650 million empire, pen over 3,000 songs, and become one of the most cherished names in American culture. This is the story of a woman who climbed out of a cabin with no electricity in the Smoky Mountains and took on the entire world, who turned every no into fuel. She gave us Jolene, I Will Always Love You, 9 to 5. But underneath the wigs, the rhinestones, and that unmistakable smile lives a far darker story, one of crushing grief, quiet battles nobody saw, and wounds that no fortune could ever buy back. How does a barefoot mountain girl become a global icon? What did it cost her? And decades into stardom, why does she still carry scars fame never touched? To understand that, we have to rewind to a childhood built on hunger, shame, and poverty so totally it shaped everything she'd become. Dolly Rebecca Parton arrived on the 19th of January, 1946, in a single-room cabin in Locust Ridge, Tennessee, the fourth of 12 children. Her father, Robert Lee, couldn't read or write and worked himself raw in the tobacco fields. The money never stretched far enough. Her mother, Avi Lee, sang to her children when there was nothing else to give them, melodies instead of meals. The cabin had no power, no plumbing, no real defense against mountain winters. Frost crept across the inside of the windows, while children huddled 3 to a bed under quilts patched from feed sacks. We were dirt poor, Dolly later said bluntly. We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. Worse than the hunger was the humiliation. Schoolmates mocking her ragged clothes and shoes, with holes clean through the soles, calling her trash, shutting her out. Yet music ran through the family like a second bloodline. Her mother's ballads, her preacher grandfather's gospel hymns rattling the church walls. By 7, Dolly was writing her own songs on scrap paper. At 10, she was on local radio. At 13, she stood on the Grand Ole Opry stage in a homemade dress, shaking but resolved. Still, home never stopped being hard. Cornbread and beans nights. A father silently crushed by mouths he couldn't feed. The morning after her 1964 graduation, 18-year-old Dolly packed a cardboard suitcase, said goodbye to her sobbing mother, and boarded a Greyhound for Nashville with $20 and a guitar. Nashville chewed up dreamers by the hundreds. Dolly moved into a roach-infested apartment, surviving on stolen ketchup packets and free crackers, some nights going hungry the same way she had as a kid. Every label door she knocked on either stayed shut or slammed. Executives saw a girl with too much hairspray and too thick a mountain accent and wrote her off before she sang a note. "You're too country for country music," one told her. Another said, "Go home, honey. Nashville doesn't need another nobody." When they did let her perform, the verdict was just as brutal. Her voice too high, her songs too plain. Alone in that tiny apartment, she began to wonder if they were right. But she refused to leave, waitressing, cutting demos for other singers, filling notebooks with lyrics born of homesickness and stubbornness. In 1966, a small label, Monument Records, finally gave her a contract. Restrictive and underpaid, but a door. Her single, Dumb Blonde, cracked the top 25 in 1967. For the first time, people knew her name. But the label wanted to reshape her into something poppier, softer, less Dolly. She recorded songs she didn't believe in and smiled through it, still barely scraping by, still desperately lonely. missing her family enough that she nearly gave up and went home. Then, Porter Wagoner, a country star with his own syndicated TV show, needed a new female co-host. His team suggested Dolly. Joining Porter's show in 1967 felt like the break of a lifetime. National TV, a real paycheck, millions of viewers. The duo's chemistry was instant, and their harmonies unforgettable. Dolly's name started to matter. But behind the cameras, Porter didn't just launch her career, he gripped it. He dictated her wardrobe, her repertoire, her public image, and took a hefty cut of her earnings. When she brought him songs she was proud of, he often dismissed them in favor of his own picks. "He treated me like I belonged to him," she admitted years later. "He didn't see an artist. He saw an extension of his brand." Their fights became constant, backstage shouting matches, icy rehearsals, Porter reminding her that without him, she'd be nothing. Dolly began disappearing into the role, smiling on camera, crying at home. Legally bound to him, she couldn't just walk away. So she wrote in secret instead, and one of those songs, a farewell letter set to music, became "I Will Always Love You." In 1974, after 7 years of conflict, she finally played it for Porter in his office. He wept and reluctantly let her go, but only after she agreed to buy out her own contract, going into debt to win back her own name. Free but broke, Dolly bet everything on herself. She released "I Will Always Love You" as a single in 1974, and it shot to #1, not just a hit, but a statement of reclaimed ownership. More followed. Jolene in 1973, the crossover smash "Here You Come Again" in 1977, and in 1980, 9 to 5. A workers' anthem tied to the film of the same name that earned her an Oscar nomination and cemented her as a crossover superstar. But the grind was brutal. Constant touring, recording, appearances, none of it free. "I was running myself into the ground," she confessed. "I thought if I stopped, it would all vanish." In the early 80s, she launched her own production company and became one of the first women in country music to own her master recordings. A decision that would later net her hundreds of millions. In 1986, she opened Dollywood in the mountains near her birthplace. Critics called it a vanity project doomed to fail. Instead, it became one of America's most successful theme parks, pulling in over 3 million visitors a year and becoming the region's largest employer. "I wanted to bring jobs back to my people," she said. "This was my way of giving something back." Publicly, Dolly had everything. Privately, she was drowning. In 1966, she married Carl Dean, a private man who avoided cameras entirely. In over 50 years of marriage, he's been photographed with her only a handful of times. Their bond was real but built on long absences. Dolly toured the world while Carl stayed home running his paving business. "There were times I felt married to my career more than to Carl," she admitted. That guilt ate at me. By the mid-1980s, the isolation, the pressure, and the exhaustion collapsed into a severe depressive episode. She has spoken sparingly about it, but has confirmed she battled suicidal thoughts during that time. "I was successful by every measure," she said, "but inside I felt empty." She has described one especially dark moment, sitting with a loaded gun until her dog ran into the room, tail wagging. And the thought of who would care for him snapped her back. She sought therapy and slowly rebuilt herself, learning, in her words, that it's okay not to be okay. Breaking doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. Carl never asked her to explain herself. He simply stayed steady. "He didn't try to fix me," she said. "He just loved me, and that was enough." Dolly's exaggerated look, the wigs, the curves, the rhinestones, became both her trademark and her target. Critics called her a caricature. Some feminists accused her of pandering to male fantasy. Tabloids speculated endlessly and cruelly about her marriage and her sexuality. She answered with humor sharpened into armor. "I'm not offended by dumb blonde jokes because I know I'm not dumb, and I'm not blonde." She weaponized the very stereotype used against her, famously joking that it costs a lot of money to look this cheap in the 90s. Brutal tabloid coverage of her weight gain hit her hardest, coming right after her depressive years. She later admitted she'd turned to food during that painful stretch. She lost the weight for herself, not the cameras, and came back stronger. Business-wise, she quietly outmaneuvered everyone who underestimated her, learning contracts inside and out and holding on to her publishing rights. That decision paid off enormously when Whitney Houston's 1992 cover of "I Will Always Love You" became a global phenomenon, earning Dolly a reported 8-figure windfall in royalties alone. The woman once dismissed as a joke had quietly out-earned the industry that mocked her. Fame never shielded Dolly from grief. In 2003, she lost her younger brother Larry to addiction, a loss that gutted her with guilt. "I had all this money, all this success, and I couldn't save my own brother." In 2018, her brother Floyd, a songwriter himself, passed away while Dolly was mid-performance, too far away to say goodbye. In 2020, her close friend and duet partner Kenny Rogers died. Grounded by the pandemic, she couldn't even attend the funeral. And earlier, in 2003 alone, she lost both her father Robert Lee, a man whose approval she'd chased her whole life and rarely received in words, and her mother Avie Lee, the woman who'd sung to her through childhood hunger. "Losing her was like losing gravity," Dolly said. Grief piled on grief, and each time, she processed it the only way she knew, through music. "When I can't speak, I sing," she said. "When I can't cry anymore, I write." By her 70s, Dolly had written over 3,000 songs and built a fortune past $650 million. Yet her real legacy became giving, not keeping. In 1995, she launched the Imagination Library, mailing free books to children from birth to age 5. The program has since expanded across 5 countries and gifted more than 200 million books. When wildfires tore through the Smokies in 2016, she created the My People Fund, delivering $1,000 a month directly to displaced families. No paperwork, no delay. During the pandemic, she quietly donated $1 million to Vanderbilt's research effort, funding work that helped develop the Moderna vaccine, then brushed off the credit entirely. "I just wanted to help." She's funded scholarships, backed children's hospitals, and stood firmly behind LGBTQ+ causes, despite her Southern church-going roots. "I don't care who you love," she said. "If you need help, I'm going to help you." At 79, Dolly still writes at dawn, still walks Dollywood, watching kids clutch their Imagination Library books, still comes home each night to the same quiet man who stood by her for 6 decades. Her body has slowed, but nothing else has. She's outlived siblings, parents, friends, depression, and decades of ridicule, and she's still smiling. "I don't need statues," she says. "I just want people to remember I tried to be kind." Her story was never really about fame. It was about turning rejection into resilience and loss into love. So ask yourself, what will you take from it? That kindness is its own kind of strength? That falling apart doesn't erase who you are? Dolly Parton proved that no matter where you start, you can still write your own ending. And if her story moved you, that's worth carrying forward.